All right, everyone. I hope you're having a great day today. Welcome to the Addicted Mind podcast. My name is Duane Osterland. I'm your host. We have a wonderful guest today. I think you are really going to like her. She really jumps in and shares her story of transformation in a very deep way, going from a very dark space and overcoming her own hurt and shame to live a life that is thriving for her, that feels really good. And it's just a great conversation. So our guest is Dr. Samantha Harte. She is a physical therapist, author, artist, and sober mom of two. As a clinician, she has spent the last 2 decades studying the interactions between science and soulfulness in the rewiring of the brain-body connection. Her first book, Breaking the Circuit: How to Rewire the Mind for Hope, Resilience, and Joy in the Face of Trauma, is set to release June 10th. This self-help memoir takes the hardest stories of Samantha's life and the 12 steps once confined to the rooms of recovery and extracts the universal message within each to help people all over the world have a blueprint for living. She is also host of the weekly original Spotify and Apple podcast, The Truth About Addiction, where she has hard conversations about addiction, recovery, and the ongoing challenges of living sober. I think you'll get a lot out of this episode. I really enjoyed interviewing Samantha, just hearing her story and connecting with her and being able to see the hard work done. It's a great conversation. And don't forget, if you're getting a lot out of the Addicted Mind podcast, please rate and review us on iTunes or wherever you get your podcasts. It really does help. We really appreciate it. And it means a lot to me. So thank you all who have taken the time to do that. It's really meaningful. And don't forget, click the subscribe button so you can get the latest episodes as well. All right, everyone, stay tuned for this episode. All right, everyone. Welcome to the Addicted Mind podcast. My guest today is Samantha Harte. Samantha, let's jump in. We've got a lot to talk about. We've got to talk about your book, Breaking the Circuit: How to Rewire the Mind for Hope, Resilience, and Joy in the Face of Trauma. And we're going to talk about your journey and how you got to that book and how, I guess, through all of that, put all these pieces together to overcome trauma and really find recovery. So I'm excited to hear your story.
Thank you. It's really, really good to be here. I love having honest, vulnerable conversations about life and hard things. So truly, this is my favorite kind of place to be. So thank you for having me.
Awesome. I love it too. That's where it's all at, I think.
So I, in February, celebrated 15 years clean and sober from drugs and alcohol. Thank you. And I have a lot to say. What I will say is what got me into recovery was not something that came from inside of me, which I don't recommend. It's just my story.
Sure.
I had a significant other who I felt, if he wasn't in the picture, made my life rather insignificant. And the look in his eyes when he found a prescription pill bottle that I was still abusing after I believe he thought I stopped, that look reflected the shame I felt inside of myself. Now, I had already had a cocaine overdose a year and a half earlier. That didn't get me sober. And if you're listening to this and you know anything about addiction, you get that. Because really what's required, in my opinion, is a spiritual rock bottom. So even the look in his eyes that got me into the rooms of recovery was not where my bottom took place, but it got me through the door, because as a hardwired perfectionist, it was becoming clear to me that I was losing a bit of control over the people, places, and things around me, which really seemed like an impossibility up until the cocaine overdose. And then it was exacerbated by the idea that this man might leave me. Oh shit, I'm losing these things that are really important to me. I thought I had everything under control. Maybe I don't. So I'm going to call the one person I know and trust who told me he's sober and just see what this is all about. Hated every single thing about the language of the steps. I did not understand at the time what I was coming up against in terms of my deeply ingrained childhood beliefs. and why the language of the steps was so difficult to stomach, which is something that I've had to unpack over many, many years of recovery and rock bottoms.
Sure. I want to, before we go into that, I want to go back just a little bit because I think you said something so important. So many people are like you when they get recovery, meaning these outside forces kind of push them in that direction. And it's a common story. I wish we could just like say, I want to change, and boom, we change. But usually there is some kind of force, like we're going to lose something that's meaningful to us and at least gets us in the door. I think that you say that. I think a lot of people relate to that. And also to say that's okay if that's where you start. You're starting.
Yes, it is okay. And I will add to that, though, in my opinion, my experience is it's not going to be enough.
No,
So
it won't be. Not in the long term. It's a starting point.
Stay in recovery and literally recover your capital S self, your authentic self. It will have to be for you because you are literally done living the way that you've been living. And the way you've been living has to be scarier than any fear you have of changing. That's what it's ultimately going to take. But yes, if it gets you in the door, great.
Yeah, to start.
So for me, really all I did that first year sober was I hung on for dear life to this man and his recovery. His name was Bobby Spillane. He was a friend of mine before he was ever a sponsor. You're supposed to get down with the women and the men are supposed to get down with the men. And I didn't want to follow a single rule that anybody was telling me. So I had a man as a sponsor, but I didn't care if he was going to be the one that was going to save my life and the one I could actually believe, who had some kind of spiritual awakening by working this program. And so, he bum rushed me through the steps. I was in New York at the time, which is where I'm from. And I just saw this really special, beautiful light in his eyes. I didn't believe a single word in the actual 12 steps, but I believed him. And when I would say things like, I have so many things though. I mean, I have a little drug problem over here, but I also have my apartment and straight A's and a good body and a job and a boyfriend and a this and a that. So I don't really see how this applies to me. Or I grew up in a house where God was for the weak and the stupid. So I don't get down with a God, even if it's of my own understanding, because even to imagine that there's a God is pathetic. You know what, Sam? You don't have to. You can just borrow my faith till you have some of your own, right? So he kept it really simple. He did not press the language of the steps on me, which I think in hindsight saved my life.
But you saw something in him.
Yep.
You said a light in his eyes.
Yes. And I will fast forward to a very difficult part of my story, but it's a really important part of my story, which is that at the end of my first year sober, Bobby started acting strange and I couldn't put my finger on it. He just seemed different, more offline, couldn't quite look me in the eye the same way. And I was finishing up graduate school. I had a chance to go to California for 8 weeks, do my final clinical rotation there. And I said to him, I don't know what's going on, but I don't want our friendship to be compromised. And if it's all right, I'm going to get a temporary sponsor while I'm out in California and we'll just go back to being friends. And I didn't hear from him. And I wanted to share so much with him when I was there. I wanted to tell him about the big, beautiful sky and the possibility of maybe also pursuing dance, which is my love language, and doing PT out in this new place. And he never picked up my calls and I was building up a big, huge resentment. And finally his wife picked up and said, Bobby relapsed. That's why you haven't heard from him. I'm not going to tell his story for you, but maybe when you come back to New York, you'll meet up with him. And I just remember feeling so sucker punched and confused.
Oh, I would believe it.
And I really did not know the monster that was addiction. I had no idea. It was unfathomable to me that a man with 22 years sober from heroin addiction who had such a wild life story and had seemingly overcome it all relapsed. And I met up with him in the city And that light that was in his eyes was out. It was not the first time, and it would not be the last time that I felt like I was in the presence of a ghost, which I've come to coin as a person whose body is alive, but whose essence is dead. And it's very eerie. And I remember asking him, what happened? What happened? I don't understand. He had a sling on his arm because he had a shoulder surgery. And all I heard was deflection and denial and excuse. He didn't look at me. I had a fucking shoulder surgery and I got a staph infection and they gave me oxy and Heather's up my ass and Bobby, did you relapse or not? I don't, what? Just a shell of who he was. And I met up with him one more time after that. He was so desperate for company that he hired me to help clean up his apartment because his arm was in a sling. So I went up to his 8th Avenue, high-rise apartment and cleaned up his place with him. And I just remember feeling so uncomfortable. And I thought, I got to take some space from this. This is just so hard for me. I can't. And then 2 weeks later, a sober girlfriend called me and she said, where are you? And I wasn't home. And she said, I need to talk to you. I need to meet you at your apartment. And it started to scare me, and rightfully so, because when she came over, she said, Bobby's dead. Oh. So Bobby killed himself. So what happened to me in that moment, besides utter devastation? I knew that if I drank and used again, I was dead. 100% clear. To relapse for me is to die, because if it killed him with all that time sober, it's coming for me. So now I know for sure I can't use, but I'll be damned if I'm going to work those fucking steps as they're laid out in the rooms of recovery. So What do? I rely solely on myself and my perfectionism and my fantastical ability to control the world around me into utter exhaustion and failure. So what that looked like was, no one suffered as much as I did and my significant other in my addiction. And we've trudged forward very immaturely, and we got engaged and we got married. So I'm newly sober and we're very fragmented. We've got all this wreckage from the front end of the addiction, a lot of cheating and lying and all these things that I had done that really never got resolved. And I thought, I'm so goddamn lucky this man stayed with me. He was on his way out and I got sober and now he married me. And so as he pulled away, I thought, well, this must be par for the course. Like, we're just going to need time to heal. And surely I can change his mind about who I am. And I can convince him to go to therapy with me, to go to Al-Anon, to work the steps, to stay in this thing with me, because I could not imagine a life without him. And the truth was, I couldn't imagine who I was without him. And what that turned into was such a heavy form of trying to control a human being that was, of course, impossible. And every time I pushed, he recoiled. And every time I begged and pleaded for him to go to a program, you're the one that did this. You need to work the program. Stop telling me what to do. This is your fault. Every time I said, I swear to God, you're cheating on me. Why do you keep leaving on those business trips? Why do you keep taking your ring off? Tell me the truth. I'm not the cheater, you are. So over the course of 2 years, I didn't work a program, didn't have faith in anything other than his love for me and my ability to control the world. And I lost my mind. And the fighting between us was so constant that somewhere inside of me, I knew I needed to leave the house. I wasn't ready to leave the marriage, but I knew I couldn't stay in that environment. So I couch surfed and had multiple living situations, which are their own chapters of a book, okay? Some of which are definitely in my book. Until a friend said to me, if you're not ready to leave your marriage and he's not ready to talk about what's really going on, what choice do you have other than to start taking care of yourself? You cannot sleep on an air mattress for another day. You need to sign a lease. And that was terrifying because that meant that something was really wrong and possibly unable to be repaired, that this whole vision for my life and my future was collapsing, that everything about how I navigated the world didn't work.
So you had to self-reflect, like this was, look, you started with your recovery. You went through that experience with your sponsor and all of that, really afraid and terrified after that experience. Then you're in this relationship that you're trying to control everything around you. And then realizing like, oh my gosh, I've got to look inward at myself and I might see something that I don't want to see. Or maybe there's something there that is broken with me. And that's terrifying.
When I signed that lease, I hadn't even gotten there yet. Shortly after I did. And I'll tell you about that. But really, out of absolute spiritual bankruptcy, I went, I don't know what other choice I have. I guess I'm signing a lease. And it was only in that space where I remember the first night, I didn't have my bed frame set up. I had a mattress on the floor. It was this loft apartment in Santa Monica, actually a really beautiful space, really high ceilings. I was staring up at the ceiling and I thought, what am I going to do now? Ever since I was little, the way I went to sleep was that my mother stroked my hair. And then I get together with this guy at a really tender young age. And for the last however many years, he's been stroking my head to sleep. I don't even know how to soothe myself to sleep. And I'm 30 years old. And then I heard a little whisper, you're going to have to soothe yourself. And that first night in that apartment, I wrapped my arms around myself and I sobbed to sleep. And then I started working with a sponsor who was in
I just want to hold on. I just got to stop there for a second.
Yeah.
Because I think you're saying something so profound in that moment of self-realization that I don't have the skills within me to soothe myself. I have to learn how to do this. I'm on my own. And if you think about that for a young child, that's terrifying. I mean, you're in the world by yourself, and how much fear and terror is in that moment of having that realization of there you are by yourself alone.
Oh, those next 8 months of my life, while incredibly transformative, were terrifying. I felt like I was walking around with a dark gray cloud over my head every single day. And, now what I understand sitting in the seat of 15 years sober with a lot of therapy behind me is that what I used to think was my drug of choice, which was control, I really now understand my first learned behavior was self-abandonment. From the gate, I learned I had better become whatever my mother needs me to be, so she is happy and I feel safe. So it's no wonder that I was.
Can you say that once again? Can you say that one more time? Because I think what you just said is really important for a lot of people out there who might be struggling to hear that statement again.
Yeah. When I share about my story, I used to start by saying my drug of choice is control. And I now understand that the first thing I ever was addicted to that kept me safe was self-abandonment, and that I could, should, and would morph into whatever my mother in particular needed me to be so that she would be happy and therefore I would be safe in the world. So I learned, if you have an instinct, you better shut that shit down. Because I was 4 years old and I said, Mommy, why do you take those pills every night? Because it used to scare me when I watched her get high.
Yeah.
And she would become somebody else. And I spoke up as a beautiful, honest, and blunt child would. And she shut that shit down and said, do you like the things you have? Yes. Well, if you like the things you have, Mommy has to work. And in order for me to work, I have to sleep. And in order for me to sleep, I have to take those pills. End of story. So if I learned at 4, you have a little voice inside of you that's nudging you to say something that doesn't like what's happening, ignore. Shut it down. Do not.
Otherwise, you're going to be abandoned. You're going to be left.
Exactly.
So you have to become whatever that person, your caretaker, wanted you to be, and you abandon yourself.
So it's no wonder I was, first of all, repeating that cycle again and again and again, and I was shoving drugs and alcohol on top of all of it. And so now you have this sober person with no new skill sets. So the only skills I have are, you better not trust your intuition. You don't know who you are. The only way your life matters is if somebody else tells you it does. Then I'm 30 years old and I go, I don't even know how to put myself to sleep. It makes complete sense. Now, again, this is sitting from a very sort of wise seat. But at the time, I was more stunned at the voice. And it took me longer to go, that's my intuition. That's my capital S self. That's my authentic self that I've been dousing drugs and alcohol on top of, that I've been covering shame on top of. And so when I worked with this next sponsor during this time in my life, she was in Al-Anon and AA. And so for anybody who is listening and doesn't know what Al-Anon is, it's a sort of a sister program to AA. And it's for the people who love the addict, who care for, whether it's a friend, a spouse, a child. And the steps are the same, but the lens and the language is a little, what I feel, it's wider. It's more compassionate. And I credit her being in that program alongside AA for what became the new way I started working the steps. And she said, what if we did them around your marriage? You're not really in danger at the moment of doing a bunch of cocaine, but you trying to control this marriage and this man is killing you, killing your spirit, and you have no peace and you have no joy. So what if we did it around the marriage? Awesome. So we did. What does that look like? Well, I am powerless over what's happening to my marriage, what I did in my addiction to cause wreckage, whether or not my husband is having an affair or not, and he's telling me the truth, what the future of the marriage will be, if any, what all the dreams and hopes for my life with this man will look like, or if they'll collapse and I'll have to reimagine in a brand new way. And when I exert power over him, over changing his mind, my life becomes unmanageable in the following ways. I have no self-worth. I have no peace. I mean, on and on we went.
And with that, it sounds like if you're going to do that and you're not going to extend that control, right, to try and keep yourself safe, you have no choice but to go into your trauma of being abandoned. I guess those play off back and forth. And so you have to do the work, to do the program, so to speak. That's how I see it.
Yes. And I don't think I had a safe place to go inward until I got to the 9th step with her. And she said, have you ever made an amends to yourself? I don't know if anybody listening can identify with perfectionism. But if you're a recovering perfectionist like me, there is no such thing as forgiveness, as letting yourself off the hook. In fact, we feel motivated by our inner critic. And it was an act of revolution to even imagine telling myself the story that while I may have made bad choices in my addiction, that I wasn't a bad person. It was the most important thing that ever happened to me in recovery, and it changed everything. Now, number one, it's not an aha moment where suddenly I'm in a practice of self-forgiveness. No, it's a constant work at it. And when life is in session and there's a new, really difficult thing, like when I had my first child and I had postpartum depression and my inner critic was louder than ever, it was as if my work with this sponsor never happened. And I had to have a whole new, deeper level of what it is to be self-compassionate in early motherhood. When you really thought you would just know how to do this and you have no idea. And can that be okay too? And the reason in regards to this time in my life when my marriage was falling apart, that the amends process was so critical, was that I didn't know until I forgave myself that I was viewing my marriage through the lens of guilt and shame. So everything that was happening, every way I was being treated, everything that I wasn't being given emotionally, physically, financially, I felt I deserved. I felt that the punishment fit the crime. This must be what I get for what I did. And I will just have to ride it out until one day this man forgives me. And when I forgave myself, him and I were going to therapy. It seemed like when I finally did this deep inner work, we were reconciling. My lease was coming up. I moved back in and he was unraveling. And it was so clear to me that it wasn't me. And I looked at him and said, I don't want to do this with you. I deserve better than this. And you chose to stay with me and you chose to marry me. And I don't know what's going on, but it's not my cross to bear. And he dropped to his knees and he begged me to stay. And my intuition and I were buddies now. We had forged a relationship over those 8 months and I trusted her. And she said, don't worry, Sam, you can stay or go. You'll find out everything you need to know. And 3 weeks later, I found out that he had been having an extramarital affair with the same person for 5 years on and off. And, that's its own Lifetime movie. The story of our marriage. By the way, we are still married. We are happily married. We are 10 years on the other side of all of that. And we have 2 children. Okay. What I can say about that is I spent a year, I moved out again. I mean, I have an extraordinary story of moving out and in many, many times. I was a pro at it. Moved out, filed for separation, was filing for divorce, was totally planning on moving on with my life, had lots of sex, self-liberated. It was fantastic. But
you're talking about that congruence when you get to that space, what you were saying earlier, where you trust yourself, that hard-earned faith in yourself in a way, where you trust your intuition and your gut and you're going to be okay because you now can, in a way, put yourself to sleep. You're going to be okay. Yep. You're going to be all right. And so if the other is going to go off and do shenanigans, doesn't mean that it's not going to hurt, doesn't mean it's not going to be painful, but you're going to be okay. That's a hard space to get to. I mean, it's a challenge.
Oh, yeah. And it's been my personal experience, and I've seen it so many times again and again that, in recovery, we say resentment is the number one offender in terms of a relapse, things that can kind of take an addict out of recovery. And I don't believe that. I believe shame is corrosive and it
Yes.
kills. And in my case, if I hadn't known for sure unequivocally that if I used again, I would die because of what happened to Bobby, the shame I was carrying around that was making me live and stay in a situation that was literally killing my spirit would have actually killed me, because
Yeah.
I wouldn't have been able to live that way and I would have drank over it.
Yeah.
So, and only when I made the amends process to myself and cleared the shame did my life start to change. And the people who die in recovery are living with shame. It's a monkey on their back. It's a 10-pound brick on their back. And they haven't yet found a way, whether it's because of the language of the steps or they need intensive therapy or both, whatever. They have not found a way to free themselves from the shame. And that is what fucking kills them.
Yeah. And that shame spiral will engulf everything and slowly suck the life out of you and everyone around you. And it's such a journey. But what you said is also like, it's also terrifying to do that work when you're like looking inward and there's a big part of you that believes that old story. I am horrible. And even if you kind of cognitively know it's not true, but your body doesn't know it, it doesn't matter. You'll avoid it. So this gets to your book, Breaking the Circuit, right? This gets to all this hard-won wisdom, effort, time spent in doing this work. I mean, it's so hard. And in many ways, I can relate to some of this work. It's just freaking difficult. But here you are, and you have wisdom to pass on.
Yeah, I do. Why I wrote the book is its own really painful story. And it's just the truth of my life, which is that 2 years ago, I lost my sister to a drug overdose. And I knew that I could no longer just do physical therapy, which I had been doing for 10 years. I had a private practice. I really loved it. I mean, I went upstream and was cash-based. I wanted to treat the whole person and the whole body. I wanted to get to the heart of the matter and the things in their lives that were going to get in the way of them actually doing the program as it was prescribed, right? And it was so good. But the more lived sober experience, the more tragedies I was traversing, the less and less I could show up in a space as just Samantha, the doctor of physical therapy, and not want to cast the widest net possible on who I was helping and how I could merge this idea of rewiring the brain-body connection, both on a physical level and an emotional level, which is really what I believe the steps, once I reimagine the language of them, have done for me. The reason I believe I am still here on this earth and my sister is not. And so I just got to writing, and I didn't really know what I was writing about, except that it was going to have to be my life story, because part of what's so powerful about storytelling is the deep connection you make to the person on the other end, right? You're really just expressing your humanity, which puts a drawbridge down between you and the other person. And so unequivocally, my story was going to get woven into the book. But when I realized I wanted it to help as many people as possible and also be a movement and not just a book, I thought, well, God, I didn't have a new experience in recovery or in my life until those steps sounded different. So what if I made the book a reinvention of the 12 steps? Because if I don't do it, someone will. It's time. It is 2024. We have more Gen Zs who are sober curious than ever before. We have more people who are angry at the patriarchy, who don't want things shoved down their throats, who are looking for a fresh take on how to come against these cultural constructs, these deeply ingrained beliefs. And why does it have to be the best kept secret that when you're a grateful recovering addict, you have access to these steps? Why can't we all? And every person I met in and out of recovery, this whole time I've been sober, is struggling. It doesn't have to be a cocaine addiction. It could be addiction to martyrdom, addiction to productivity, grind until you drop, addiction to thinness, Netflix, food, shopping, Instagram. We are in cycles of dysfunction. And I don't know about you, but I've hardly met a single human being in my life who had such a healthy childhood that they actually have a template for soul care as an adult.
Yeah.
We
Very
know
rare to find.
Right?
Very rare to find.
We keep talking about self-care. Go to yoga, take care of yourself, do meditation. None of that matters if you don't have an inner template for how to navigate adversity. Not when things are good, when things are hard and uncertain and devastating. And so it was so important to me that my book was broken up into chapters. There's 12 chapters. Every chapter corresponds with a step. I start off with the actual language of the step. I give AA all the credit in the world. And then I say, I know, don't close the book. I hated this step too. And then I tell a story about my life where I had no access to real power, but I tried. I tried to rely on all my old coping mechanisms and all the reasons why I relied on it, because they kept me safe as a child. And how difficult it actually is to get to a breaking point where you're zapped out of your subconscious operating patterns enough to go, I can't do this. I cannot do this. This thing that was so good for me at 4, that's killing me now. But now what? Now what do I do? And I describe how to get real access to power. I describe general scenarios for the person stuck in traffic who's going into a fit of road rage, to the person who really wanted the job and didn't get it, to the person whose parent is sick, who's trying to make their parent go to the doctor, but the parent won't. It doesn't matter what it is. And I give the readers prompts. I give them actionable takeaways at the end of each chapter, which is my version of rewriting the 12 steps. It's what I've done 1,000 times over in the last 10 years. Based on the situation at hand, based on having miscarriages. How do you navigate that? I don't know, but I'm not powerless over drugs and alcohol in that situation. I'm powerless over the fact that I had a miscarriage and whether I'm going to get pregnant again and when and what that's going to look like. And again and again, losing my dad, losing my sister, I've had to reimagine the steps over and over and over. And in my experience, the more modern the language, the more trauma-informed the approach, the more healing and effective they are, and the more people they can help. And so I think in the wake of losing my sister, it's in part, it's trying to give a voice to someone who no longer has one, to someone who, when she did have one, shame kept her quiet.
Yeah.
And it's a way for me to do something purposeful with my pain. Is this another form of trying to fix and save the whole world around me, like I tried to do with my mother? Maybe. But
once again, there's that understanding as you were saying all this, I was thinking the image of the young girl in bed, not knowing how to soothe herself in this traumatic environment, and how that trauma begets more shame in our lives. And if we don't know how to navigate it, you're right. The tragedy is loss of life, loss of, and when I mean not just death, but loss of living your life. Even if you're alive, you can be dead. Like you said earlier too, the ghost, the shell, right? And when we're stuck in that shame and that place, that's what that is. And having the skills to do that. And you're absolutely right. We know more now than we ever have about how the brain works and how trauma impacts the nervous system. There are so many more tools that when a lot of this 12 stuff was written, we had no idea. It was our best guess at the time. It was profound at the time. But once again, there's so much more information out there, so much more. And then the lived experience of it, and we can put it in context.
Yep. Yes. And that's really how I feel. I know my book's going to piss some old school big book thumpers off, and I am completely fine with rattling the cage. I feel just like my work as a clinician. When I think now, I love yoga. Okay. So when I go to yoga and they say to get in chair pose and they're cueing, keep your knees together, squeeze your inner thighs for stability. I'm the one doing the squat with my feet hip width apart, making sure my knees are tracking straight ahead, because not only is that biomechanically safer, I have a knee injury and I need to use my hips for support. So I'll be damned if I'm going to do it. And even though that's the sacred ancient tradition of yoga, and the pose is very specific. But I believe when we know better, we need to do better. And the steps are the same. They're sacred. They're gorgeous. They were revolutionary, as you said, at the time. But science has moved forward. The research supports things like the practice of self-forgiveness and self-compassion. We know shame is a killer. Brene Brown did all her work on vulnerability and shame. There is research after research to support where the needle is moving. And so I don't really care who I upset if it's going to help somebody else.
I have a statement that I try and live by, and it's like, beware the tyranny of the one right way. You know, just beware the tyranny of the one right way. There are so many ways to get where we need to go. And if we can listen to ourselves, we can find that path. And it sounds like Breaking the Circuit, your book, helps people get there and do that. So, oh man, Samantha, your story is powerful. And I can feel your passion that you've put into this to help guide people, that, like we were saying earlier, that hard-won wisdom that comes from, I guess, being in the trenches with that pain, and that shame, and walking through it to the other side. It's so hard to do, and it's terrifying, but thank you for writing this book and putting it out there.
You're welcome. It's interesting because on the one hand, I want it to be a bestseller and I want to help hundreds of thousands of people. And I have all these, big, huge dreams. And there's so many other projects that I'm doing in tandem with the book where I'm really trying to make it a movement. I'm talking about making it into a documentary with some big time directors. I have a screenplay that I wrote, which is an adaptation of the book. All 12 steps are in the screenplay. I plan on selling it and making it a movie. I'm making music that corresponds to my book. Now, all of that is amazing. It's amazing. I'm reckoning with my young artistic self, this part of me that I also left behind when my cocaine addiction took off. I was trying to get a record deal when I was 19. All that stuff is so exciting. But when I take all of it away and I reduce down what matters, I am the cycle breaker in a very long lineage of ancestral trauma, dysfunction, addiction, and mental illness. I have already won. And if I die today, my children have my book. They will know how their mother got through her hardest things. They will have a blueprint for their lives, and so will their kids and their kids. They'll hear my voice on my own podcast. They'll hear my voice on a track and what it sounded like when I sang about my pain. My job is done. And so anything else that happens from here is a bonus, truly.
Absolutely. That's awesome. Thank you for saying that, Samantha. Okay. So as we get to the end here, I always like to ask everybody one question before we wrap up. And, someone's listening and maybe they are in the grips of that shame and that, stuck there, and you could tell them one thing. What would you want them to know? What would be the thing you'd want to tell them?
Just because you've made some bad choices does not mean you are a bad person. You are a good person who made some bad decisions. And your life is worth it.
Oh, thank you, Samantha. Thank you. Where can people find you? They want this book. Where do they go? How do they get a hold of you? They want to ask you questions. Where do they go?
Yeah. So right now, my Instagram handle and my website are the same. It's Dr. Samantha Harte. So on Instagram at Dr. Samantha Harte. And there's so much information that I post all the time about my book and about my message, and just informative posts, even if you don't get the book, that are valuable if you're wanting to change a pattern that you're stuck in. And on Amazon, if you type in Breaking the Circuit, How to Rewire Your Mind for Hope, Resilience, and Joy in the Face of Trauma, you can actually pre-order the book now. And on pub date, which is June 10th, it will get shipped directly to you. On my website, I have all these really cool packages where, depending on what you want, you'll get a signed copy of the book plus all kinds of really cool digital assets like fitness programs, meditation videos, a fitness band, just all these things I've created over the years as a PT that merge mind, body, wellness. So there's lots of availability to get the book and to hear the message. And those are the main places where you can get it.
Awesome. I will put all the links in the show notes at theaddictedmind.com. So you'll be able to get that all there too. So I'll put it all there. Samantha, thank you so much for coming on and sharing your wisdom, your hard-won wisdom with all the listeners. I truly appreciate it.
Thank you so much. It was great to be here.
All right, everyone. Thank you for listening to the Addicted Mind podcast. As usual, all the links will be in the show notes at theaddictedmind.com. So check them out. And if you want to continue the conversation online, join our Facebook group. Just go to Facebook, type in the Addicted Mind podcast, and click join. You can also follow us on Instagram at Addicted Mind Podcast. So check that out as well. And for all of you that have written a review on iTunes or wherever you get your podcast app, I really appreciate it. And here's a recent review by McGew35. Life-changing, eye-opening. This podcast has changed my life. I discovered it 6 months ago and have developed the routine to listen to it at least 2 to 3 times a week. I am facing challenging moments in my life, finding myself on a no-way back road. So I had to recognize and embrace my addiction and call it by its real name without hiding it. Good for you, man. That's awesome. I want to thank you too, Duane, and all the guests that have shared tremendous wisdom through their stories. I could find hope and coping mechanisms and relate to those friends who have experienced the same things as me. I am still trying every day. Getting out of addiction is not an easy road, but I can tell you that I feel closer to myself every day, to my deep, authentic self. I realized how distracted I was in my life and changed that perspective. Then all things around me started to change little by little. Suppose you are going through a difficult moment facing any addiction, not only substance use. In that case, this podcast is amazing and eye-opening to educate yourself and give you more insight to take action every day in your life. Thanks again, Duane, for all that you do and the impact you make on this world through this podcast. Wow, thank you so much for writing that. That means a lot to me, and keep going. You can do it. All right, everyone. Thanks for listening. Have a wonderful rest of your day, and I'll talk to you on the next episode.